Do we all know what we're talking about today? Are we ready to get started?
Never.
You have topics?
I guess. Not that you guys research them or anything beforehand, but we do have them.
Send prompts, not nudes. I just want to AI some shit.
All right, guys. Welcome back to the DNAi podcast 2025. We had a busy end of year and we got a few episodes out. So pardon the 2-week gap here. It's been a busy beginning of year and we're going to jump back in and keep with the regularly scheduled content. John, James, Randy, hello. How are you?
Doing
Happy
well.
New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy
What's
New
up?
Year. Everybody's got some drinks in their hands, I believe. I'm guessing this should now be a bit of what everyone's drinking. Just quick round the room. Let everybody know what you got since we did it last time.
All right. Yeah, the bourbon round. So I aged this bourbon myself, 7 months in a 5-liter barrel. I can't even remember what I blended in there, but I cut off orange rinds and stuffed them in the barrel, and it now tastes like a candied old fashioned.
That sounds awesome. That's like you're a executive by day and then you have your brewery, your at-home garage brewery going by night. You need to make a separate YouTube channel on that.
It's a bit of a hobby, a bit
TJ?
of an obsession. It turned into I got a bourbon steward certificate. So I don't know. I like the history behind it.
You have to understand, this is when he says carried, he means he strapped it to his body for 7 months and carried that bourbon.
I burst the barrel.
This is a very intimate experience.
To be able to relate to his wife a little bit better with her
Well,
9 months of pregnancy, right?
Yeah, no, it's actually really funny that you say that, John, because I had an incident. The barrel started leaking, and it got really cold temperatures, and it was leaking so much, so I had to scramble around and figure out how to seal it up, and it was like I had to babysit it every single day and make sure that I wasn't losing the sweet nectar of the gods out of there.
That's pretty much the same. I did a similar thing, but mine had the same occurrence. I made it, I think, 8 months, and I came home one day and I was like, "Why does the whole house smell like bourbon? This is awesome!" But at the same time, I'm like, "Problem." Go over to the bourbon room and it's just bourbon is going everywhere. I'm like, "Crap, no!" So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So what are you drinking, John?
I am drinking New Riff malted rye, 6-year by New Riff. It's a great bottle. Their sour mash, super sweet.
I'm going to need some education. I've got just the poor man's bullet bourbon frontier whiskey in my cup.
We'll help you out. We have options. I'll send you some bottles.
I could see the disgust on your guys' faces when I said bullet.
It's not bad-ish. Depends on
I'm
your
still
opinion.
learning. I'm pretty new. I'm still learning the ropes. So
This podcast brought to you by, not sponsored by Bullet, ever.
yeah, all alcohol.
I'm in your camp, Sam. I need to up my bourbon skills in tech because I'm drinking wine today, which the backstory is very arduous. I got it at a restaurant in exchange for money and took it home. So
You got paid?
No, they got paid, but it was
Oh,
half
It's
off.
for his money.
I was just wondering, like, the way I don't know the way you worded it. It almost was like they paid you to take the wine home. I'm like, what restaurant is this?
I took my wife out for her birthday dinner, and she's not drinking right now. Insisted I get the wine and then have it for her. So I've got to drink it and get it down before it goes bad.
And what is it? Is it a cab?
It's a Toscana.
Ooh,
Italian place. Very good.
sounds great. There you have it. There's our alcohol selections for this lovely Friday afternoon as we record this. I think we have plenty to talk about, so we should just jump into it. We'd outlined a few things that we were going to touch on, but you guys have probably seen all of the buzz going around from the CES 2025 announcements. There's plenty of big-time tech being talked about. One of the most notable is Nvidia's announcements. They've been making some waves. We also read a blog post from Sam Altman making some bold statements that we touched on our last episode, but we can jump into them. John, where do you want to start? Nvidia or Sam Altman?
I think Nvidia is far more entertaining.
I don't normally think of Sam Altman and entertainment in the same grouping. He's interesting. He's intriguing.
There's drama. The drama.
Yeah, there's drama, but entertaining in and of himself, I'm not sure.
But we want to be infotainment, right? So the news you can use,
Right.
I think, is Nvidia for sure.
That's right. All right, let's talk about it. If everyone's seen his announcements, if not, listen up. We're going to cover them for you, and you'll know what it's all about. So Nvidia announced all kinds of new stuff. I think the most interesting to me, and you guys jump in and comment, is the overall topic of conversation on embodied AI. There was a lot of announcements that are within that realm. And if anyone's not clear what that means, that simply means giving AI a physical form factor of some sort to move around and operate and interact in the world that we all live in. How about you guys? Anything else jump out?
I only want to say this. I think you should extend that to digital because one of their announcements was specifically against video game characters and it being like a partner for you in video games. And I have to say, the demo, I hope it works as seamlessly as the demo, because if it does, oh my God,
It
that
looks
is going
amazing.
it's just going to absolutely revolutionize MMOs, or pretty much any video game, honestly. But if you think about embodiment, the ability to use senses or some sort of like other chunk of data to interact with the world around them, a lot of the robots are being trained for embodiment in digital world. So I think it's safe to say you can probably use both.
So, and that's been an argument of yours for a bit, right? That embodied AI doesn't necessarily mean a physical form. I feel like I've heard you say this before.
I have only because I think the word embodiment in its traditional sense has been like you have to have all the senses of a human in order to be embodied, and I don't think that's relevant anymore. And if we get really technical about it, no AI on its own is processing all of those sensors independently. There isn't
Mm.
like a single model that's doing all of that in real time. It's these little structures. Now, what Nvidia showed, ooh, it's pretty impressive. But from a experience standpoint, they're training embodiment in a digital world. And I was playing around on the Nvidia site, and like when they were doing demos last year for the second Earth concept and some of the, or what is it, James? Is that the right term? Second Earth or digital Earth or whatever?
World models.
Yeah, I don't know what the term is. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
they're trying to essentially extrapolate these whole environments out of generative models and have them like render predictive weather modeling was the one that blew my mind. I actually got to interact with it.
Oh,
And holy crap, it was really cool to see that we've been doing some risk stuff with LLMs for a while, but to see it actually interact with a 3D map and look at real-time weather and start to predict what's going to come over the next few days and weeks was really cool. And in that same vein, that's essentially what they're doing with, instead of I can only train 50 robots because I only have 50 robots to train, I can train 1 million robots in whatever difficult terrain and world I want to in a digital. They can still learn the same parameters around like how to adapt to terrain and things. And then when I port that model over to a real world robot, it's capable of applying the same. I don't know. It's really impressive.
But yeah, I want to talk about that and make sure everyone understands that a little bit because I agree. I think it's fascinating. And as I understand it, at least, world models have just gotten so much better that we're now able to simulate real world physics and as they would be trained in the real world. If you remember old videos from like Boston Dynamics, they're jumping around in these warehouse obstacle courses, the robots that they had set up for them. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, if any of you guys have a different understanding, but now we're able to simulate real world physics and interactions well enough that they no longer have to train them exclusively in these real world environments. They can take that in and then multiply it by 1 million and now do all their training in the simulated.
Before we even get there, I have a topic just for James, because like James will probably have some thought on this. So there is a researcher, and I absolutely love his videos because he was doing a bunch of research on LLMs and their applicability to like real world physics. I think I sent you the video, James, a while back, and essentially he was letting the LLM predict fluid dynamics in 3-dimensional space with real world objects. If I take a cup and I take another cup and I pour it and I have the AI render the fluid dynamics of pouring that and then moving it around, an LLM was able to do it.
It was a language model.
Yeah, it is a really cool video. But the interesting debate that was going back and forth and lit up the forums was, does it actually know physics? Does it know 3-dimensional fluid dynamics?
yeah, coming from a Stratcom guy, right? But language is literally the fabric of our reality. It just is. It's how we exist. It's how we innovate. It's how we communicate with each other. It's how we explain everything around us. So yeah, there's infinite applications of that, and language models are opening up the door and opening up the mind to what's possible and non-traditional ways of thinking about things. And yeah, language is the key. What'll be interesting to see is over the course of human history, over the course of even recent history, language changes. Now with the introduction of AI that's fueled by language, I am so curious to see how language continues to evolve, right?
It's
And
also
like,
simultaneously bringing down language barriers too for real-time translation. So instead of
yeah,
Oh,
all these different languages spoken everywhere, at a certain point, that's going to coalesce and we'll all be speaking the same language essentially.
well, it won't be that we were speaking the same language. It just won't matter at all.
It's real-time conversation communication.
No, it's one of the, we're about to have a change in administration in the US, and a big policy issue in the US, especially towards China, is the fact that our language models and their language models, whether intentionally or not, embody a worldview, right? That power is
Mhm.
services. And so that's one of the really interesting things, just really impressive Chinese language models that have come out, especially in the past few weeks, and a debate in the online community about whether people will use them or not. And they have utility. A lot of organizations, especially that don't want to use OpenAI or want to save some money, they have some options. But that broader question of, if language is reality, whose reality do you want to consume? And what are you consuming? Do you even know that you're consuming it while it's steering you towards different worldviews?
I know James hates the philosophical approach, but this is what, like, he wants the pragmatic approach, but this is the stuff that I love. Let's get into the weeds here.
by the way, I did just look it up. We were calling them world models. They're called digital twins.
Yeah,
Digital
there you go.
twin,
Thank you.
it's
Yeah.
a virtual representation of a real world physical object, system, or process. And that is cited by Wikipedia, Meta, and the Digital Twin
Well,
Consortium.
That's a big part of manufacturing too, like their digital twin for not even just AI, but for the way SpaceX builds their rockets, right? Like they have a complete digital copy of all of the components and all the infrastructure that runs through simulations. So that way they know when they go to manufacturing what's going to happen. Some of that's AI, some of that's just brute force simulation, but the AI side of it is getting really exciting.
I mean,
Is it correct to say that, like, the technology's just progressed so much that we can accurately rely on the data that's generated from simulated environments, whereas in the past, we might not have been able to do that. We might have been
no,
able
no,
to
no.
get an idea.
It's different. We used to simulate things just like this, but we couldn't do it at scale and at the speed. It would take a computer scientist, or it would take like a research lab to create a digital simulation of a wind tunnel, as an example. It's probably the most used and most like high volume market out there for race cars and all aircraft and all the other stuff. But we'd represent that in a digital like twin, right? And that would be study, and then they do a digital event, and then they would make the part, and then they put it in a real wind tunnel and validate how far off they were. And then they would hone the digital twin a little bit, or the part, whichever one that they think is wrong. But now you can go to the Nvidia splash page for like model access, and on the front page is a picture of a Corvette in a wind tunnel, and you can use an LLM to simulate like car aerodynamics.
That's crazy.
What?
Yeah.
So we've gotten to a point where, and it's really fun because I think Randy, about 8 months ago, you were sitting in my living room, and we were talking about like essentially simulating entire like software systems using LLMs. And but that's, if we think about what they're doing, that's literally what they're doing. Like they're taking what used to be entire suites of software and simulating what that thing is built to do based off of past occurrences of that thing, and it's doing it accurately, and in some cases like really accurately.
So it's a big leap in compute then, in the power we're able to spool up for these simulations to be able to scale that training across thousands of units at the same time.
Just another thing, you guys are probably familiar with genetic algorithms, right? In which you're essentially giving it the environment and you're letting AI evolve and mutate, right? And the scale at which you can apply that when the boundary conditions are much more robust and you can go at a much higher, you already at computer speed can basically, so for our audience, if you haven't heard that, right, it's like the concept is like a digital version of a robot, but you don't specify how it fits together. So the first version might need to go towards some goal and not know how to do it. and then the next version figures out how to make motion, but it's in the wrong way. And so that each version will recombine and in the same way in genetics and like natural selection, there'll be maybe 10 models or 100 models, and then whichever one gets furthest gets to pass on its characteristics with some randomized mutation. So you could do that kind of stuff too. And again, these experiments had traditionally been rather constrained in terms of what you could do with them. And I don't know how much like foundation models evolved at that point that we were using them in every day, although they were interesting in research. But now just hearing about what's going to be possible in these worldviews, just create new species, create certainly new proteins and genetics and things that we're thinking about in the biospace. It's just a lot of really cool things happening.
Can I have gills?
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
Yeah,
That's
that
how
part.
you get zombies.
Yeah, we're not far off from just being able to start tweaking and adjusting and testing some pretty wild
Yep.
things. I just posted to our social media accounts that foundational model that was used to analyze wastewater around different societies, and they were able to detect precursors for viral diseases and things like COVID. And I guess I probably shouldn't say that if that's going on YouTube. I think they still censor that word. But any viral transmission, they're detecting it beforehand, allowing the AI to identify, hey, we've got a pathogen or a airborne disease that's getting ready to go viral, and knock it out. It's really wild that all of these areas of research and study are simultaneously
Let's tie it all together.
Yep.
And Nvidia's announcement, and you have their, what are they calling it, digits
Yes.
thing?
The
Or
world
What one?
computer.
Yeah.
Project.
yeah.
Digits.
Oh God, we are buying. Yeah.
My
yes.
computer is on strike right
200
now.
billion parameter localized model that can just run my. Oh God, I'm gonna hook that into everything.
The minute that came out, my computer just decided to give up on all.
Yeah,
all
it was like.
But not everybody speaks in billions of
No, I'm
parameters.
gonna let James give this because he is the lover of all things localized model.
So Digits is a little mini supercomputer, basically, that they announced that just sits on your desk. What's special about it?
Well, it's a supercomputer that sits on your desk.
That's all.
So
When you put it like that,
yeah, and it can be, you could use it as just a compute processor, so you can route your models through it, or I believe they even said it could be a workstation, so you could set up your Windows or whatever, your Linux or whatever operating system you want to run on it, and then you would download your local models, like either through your Olama or different platforms. But I think practically speaking, I think we're going to the future. Right now, I think it's $3,000, right? So
yeah,
it's priced out of a lot of folks' range, but the prices of this stuff is just going to keep getting cheaper, like we've been saying. But to me, this really speaks to the empowering the individual, or having the equipment so that individuals can have more privacy, right? Like that, like I see that being a huge thing, especially in the AI space moving forward. These things they're essential tools, they're huge accelerators, but some folks might be a little on the fence about the privacy of it, not wanting to, in some small businesses, right? I don't want to be using a tool to, even large businesses for that matter, I don't want to be using a tool where my data is leaving the environment. So being able to localize these things, especially for an individual, I think is really powerful. I think it speaks to the democratization of AI through hardware. I think there's going to be a learning curve around that. Not everyone knows how to set up their own local model. That's getting easier. There's platforms like Pinocchio that allow you to just click and download verified local models. But yeah, my opinion is I think it's great. I'm just dying to get my hands on one, and 200 billion parameters, to go back to John, that's a big model. That's a pretty big model. It's a very capable model, and it's going to allow people to do more of the things that they like to do. The music generation, the image generation, the video generation. It's just not great with the compute resources that people have available locally. You have to go to the cloud, and I think this sorts to get over that.
Nothing like sitting on your desktop that does a petabyte.
Yep,
Like
a petabyte, 128 gigabytes of unified RAM.
Wow.
And you could tie the two of them
Yes.
together.
Yeah, you can stack them. You can
You
stack multiple.
Yeah.
Like,
Sign me up.
Yeah.
oh my God. A 405 billion parameter model on your desk.
Yeah, I think you said 3,000, and they're targeting May of this year for release.
I was just going to say, like, even for Enable, even for our business, we're gonna drop subscriptions. We're gonna be
Yeah.
able to do a lot of the things we need to go out and what we use for marketing or what we use for image generation, things like that. We'll just be able to build our own locally
Yeah,
and run
it's
it.
cool. That's the coolest thing that like we could actually make a $3,000 investment after building our own bespoke marketing model, deploy that model on this endpoint and serve it to the whole company
Yep.
for a one-time cost.
Yep.
It is going to drastically impact utility of API usage in cloud massively, because the other side of this that we haven't even touched on is look at what is it, 4 now? Is it 4 or
5.4.
5? I can't remember.
5.4. I think
5.4.
4 is, I believe
It's
so.
I thought it was
Yeah.
3, but I might have missed it.
There's a 9 billion parameter model that performs at
Mhm.
88% of a GPT-4o.
Or look at Gemma. Gemma's
Like-
got a 1 billion.
So how many of those can I fit on one of these?
Yeah. So the other beautiful thing is that if you don't want one of these things, that's the new competition for the cloud. They've got to bring prices down so that they don't lose that stream.
Thank God.
So we've got better hardware, we've got better models, we've got better pricing. People have a hard time understanding one hyperbolic curve that they're riding. We're riding like 7.
All
You
of
think
them.
about all the
Yeah.
trends that are converging here.
Well,
Yeah,
just
speaking directly to that, I saw an article just after CES or after Nvidia announced all of this at CES that was saying that Nvidia with their chips and with their new production is on pace to outpace Moore's law.
Moore's
And
law
so
has
if
been
any-
gone for 2 years. We're 8 times Moore's law currently.
Yeah. So it's just it's not even a curve anymore. It's just up. We're just going up really fast.
Well, accessibility is a key factor of that innovation. And think about it this way. If I don't have to have access to Google or Azure or whatever cloud service, which is still, while it's way more wide open than it used to be, if we would have had this podcast a year ago, the conversation we would have come up about how many models and what companies have access to what models. And we've actually had big companies be told by Microsoft that they could sublease a model from our company, a startup, because we had more models in holding. So like that was a reality. That's not the reality it is today. It's way more accessible. Microsoft, $80 billion in infrastructure investment, which is absolutely unbelievable. 2 years ago, it was a $10 billion investment. So like Microsoft in 3 years, I bet next year will probably be bigger than 80, but like in 3 years, we'll have spent over $100 billion in infrastructure to keep up with demand. And then we're now like that speaks to just like the demand and accessibility, just getting it out there so that companies and everybody can use it. Now we're going to put it on your desktop and anybody can get it. So now we're going to take Moore's law that there was a whole bunch of people who either had bad internet access or couldn't get access to Azure infrastructure, or if they got access to infrastructure, they were limited in scope, and we're going to put it on their desktop.
That's incredible.
Canceling my ChatGPT subscription.
Yeah, I want to explain the difference between, just for everybody who may not be familiar with how things just work right now, cloud infrastructure versus running locally. Randy, do you mind diving into that just at a high level for somebody who may be a little bit lost on exactly what we're saying?
James is describing a supercomputer on your desktop. The cloud is the supercomputer on somebody else's desktop. It's really all it is. And there's a lot of fancy terminology, but it's data centers that are somewhere else that you can connect to and use as your own, and architecture and tools that you use them, you rent them instead of own them, basically. When you need them, you get them, and somebody else manages all the bare metal and all the networking type things that you don't really need to worry about as a consumer, right? That's Cloud 101. Cloud 201 is just that these things are they are supercomputers and massive stores of every kind of capability and software that you might need, and they're in a massive war to grab your consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And so to do that, they outcompete each other by price, they outcompete each other by features, right? Anything we build as we're working on a cloud, right? We always have to look at what is our Azure tooling versus the vendor tooling that might be available. And usually there's an Azure option, and as Microsoft likes to do, it's about 80% of what you need, and it's usually pretty good. But it's, from an economic perspective, it's all about trying to just capture that compute, and whoever can hold your market share. We all come, John, James, and I all come from financial services where it was share of wallet, right? And the cloud providers is your share of compute. Now, what has happened is the denominator of how much compute I have has gone up by 8x or 100x, because not only has the ability to do more come up, but the demand and the things I want to do now, everybody wants to do AI versus just data scientists and niche applications 5 years ago. So that denominator of compute to have has gone up, and it's a scramble to capture it, which we're benefiting from as prices come down.
And I guess we'll also see an increase in speed too, right? Because cloud infrastructure is reliant on your internet connection to be able to transmit data and access these cloud services. Whereas a model like the digits sitting on your desk running locally, you no longer necessarily have to go ping some
For
data center somewhere.
many businesses, that's not a factor. If you're doing like high frequency trading, then sure. And that's where you've got hedge funds that'll have compute centers right next to the stock exchange, because
From a user
millisecond
standpoint,
thing.
right? For people
Yeah,
that there's
maybe for some of this stuff that
That's
could have,
yeah,
like,
the difference for the user is, let's say today I've got my 64 gigabytes of RAM, and then I've got my GPU that has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. If I can run a big model, it's just bottlenecked, right?
Yep.
And so even though I've got a really cool graphics card that can process a lot, it's going to take a long time to generate that image. With the digits, right? The difference is that memory is unified and the processing is so powerful. Like you're like something that would probably take a minute 30 seconds for me to generate on my computer is going to take seconds
Yeah.
if like on this digits platform, right? So
yeah.
So
that's the difference to me. I know that's not the local versus cloud comparison, but it's the
It's the
local to local
availability of that
comparison.
architecture,
Yeah.
right? To have a
Yeah.
have a machine that could do that previously, you needed to be a cloud provider, pretty big.
Yeah.
you'd have an in-house server stack.
Yeah. Now that's available on your desktop.
Yeah.
I was going to say the Mac Mini doesn't look as sexy anymore after that announcement.
Yes and no. There's a beast of one out there, and there's also the Mac Pro, I think, or what is it called? The developer one that has a terabyte of unified RAM or something ridiculous. It's absolutely monstrous. It also costs like $10,000 at the base setup. But either way, I think you're going to see two main themes come out of this. One, a demand for unified RAM. And the other crazy thing that I realized, because I recently built a new computer, is I thought RAM was fast when I was overclocking it to 5600 2 years ago. They're clocking it to 10,800 stable on current motherboards. Like the Asus Crossfire, which is actually the board that I have, they announced 10,000. I was like sitting there, no, I'm not clocking my RAM to 10,000. How stable is it? And they're like, oh, no, it's stable. You can buy this today. And I'm like, not a chance. So I went with 8,000. That's that was as conservative as I could stand to be. But and James is probably shaking his head inside. He's probably like, that's pretty good. You normally I'm like 10,800. I think you mean 12,000. But I've had enough stability issues in the new build, so I'm glad I didn't go to that. But the unified RAM is actually going to create an interesting demand. So this machine, I think what we're going to see in the same way that we see current like desktop builds, and there's a completely emergent market that has become very transparent in like custom builds that has grown massively over the last, I don't know, James, what do you think? Like 5-6 years, it's become a popular thing. Whereas it used to be like a really niche side hobby. I think you're going to see that same build and customization where Nvidia comes out with a new chip. You pop your monster beast supercomputer on your desktop open, you swap their chip out, and now you have the next generation of AI stupid that can just be right there next to you.
It's going to get fun bringing it all back to gaming because we're all a bunch of nerds here. I watched those demos too, and that was cool. And they're also rolling out their new 50 series GPUs, which are doing this frame doubling with AI so that you can push something from 60 frames per second in
four frames per one.
Per one generated, correct. Yeah. If you're not a gamer, that might not mean much to you, but that's impressive. That gives you frames per second multiplied by 4 that you would not have been able to get otherwise.
My laptop's running about 30 frames per minute.
I'm trying to look for information about the power consumption. I'm really curious about that.
Oh, it's so high on the new ones.
On the digits
or the new 50 series alone, I would imagine on the digits it's even higher.
Yeah, well,
I'm actually on the Nvidia site but they do not talk about it. That would be, we don't want to talk about the negative attributes of having a supercomputer plugged
I
in on
do.
your desktop.
Like if
I do.
mean,
I'm still going to buy it.
if you need a space heater, right? Like
Oh my God.
Yeah, right.
There you go.
in the winter, I just shut the vent, my heat register. I just shut that vent off because when I run my 4090, it gets toasty enough.
Yeah.
It's
Mine will heat this room to 86. I've had it up to 86 degrees before in the winter. It cooks.
Oh, let's see here. NVIDIA Digits Dev Box had a maximum power consumption of 1,350 watts under heavy multi-GPU workloads. So that's actually not that much more than like a high-performing gaming rig right now.
Mine's 1200, so yeah.
Not bad. Moore's law, right? Things get cheaper, more powerful. Means they
What
consume
was the
less
wattage?
energy.
1350 was
1350.
Yeah, 1350 watts.
I'm searching what household appliances take up 1350 watts.
Yeah, let's give it
Oh,
a
just
real world comparison.
supercomputers. But take a second to appreciate that. Like that's a super like this technology used to require like
Rooms,
big rooms,
buildings.
right?
It's like a company would need its own nuclear reactor in order to get enough power.
Interesting.
Portable
Yeah,
air
but-
conditioning units.
Yeah,
Space.
this is really cool. This is incredible. And the size of it, do you see the size of it? It's tiny.
Is the size of as a Mac Mini, right? Just a little thing sitting there on your desk.
A little baby AI sitting there.
Yeah, don't touch it. Oh my gosh, that thing's going to be hot.
I want
Piping
to stack
hot.
10 of them.
You're going to blow your house out of the neighborhood.
You already know I had to have it rewired. So game on.
I mean,
Sure.
my biggest takeaway is just that Nvidia will have their chips in nearly every single piece of technology that exists. And they're talking robots, they're talking autonomous vehicles, they're talking supercomputers, and that gets interesting too, just because they're massive. But
this is circle it right back.
yeah, bring
If
it in.
we can take LLMs and simulate software, do you still need software? Or what type of software do you actually need? So it used to be we needed CPUs because we had requirements around software. But we're like, one, if you think about what NVIDIA had, I think it was like 3, 4, 5 years ago, they had software that could replicate how a CPU would operate, and they could run operation systems on just a GPU. It never really caught. People didn't want to use it. So it got like shelf-lifed, and it came up at, I think 3 years ago as like, oh, you remember they did this? Maybe we could get rid of CPUs, and it never really bit again. But if we think about this from we're getting to the point where we can have LLMs that in live build GUIs or interfaces for humans to interact with, which means we're very soon approaching a point where we no longer need a traditional architecture for a PC to operate with a CPU. There might be a world where, yes, we only operate on GPUs. And the only reason we operate on GPUs is because everything we see, touch, interact with, or is generated is AI.
I just want my computer to boot up the same way every time. So
AI will probably work better. Honestly, coming to you soon.
I would hate to boot into an encrypted system because the AI is feeling spicy that day.
Yeah, you never know.
I was joking earlier as we were setting up, right? Like we were all having issues and glitches with our computers at the same time setting up this podcast. And that's what it's going to look like, I think. When the AI finally decides it's had enough of us, we won't know. We'll just be like, why is this dumb box not working?
Nothing's working.
Why is the entire satellite telecommunications system? No, but
so with all these, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, but seriously, if we think about the way in which that exponential curve is occurring, like these are not, if we would have talked about this 4 years ago, we would have been laughed at. Like this, these topics are literally
lazy people.
Is he crazy? Yeah, exactly. Is this dude crazy? But this is where we are currently. This is a realistic conversation. And actually, it's not even that far fetched. If we would have had, me, Randy, and James have had conversations that happened even before we thought that they could have happened. We were having like, oh, you know what? I see the future. I can see where this is headed. We're going to see this in 2 years. And it's 6 months later, it's here. It's like, wow, that was fast.
I think that the future is here, but it isn't evenly distributed. There's going to be a lot of the world that is not living in this reality for a very long time.
92 million potential jobs.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I don't go look this up, but I did see a thing that cited a study that I did not verify. So take that for what it is. But They were saying
This
that
AI
someone,
post.
yeah, exactly, some AI generated post.
I
They were talking
hallucinated
about
this.
just how few people in the world have actually heard of ChatGPT and how many fewer people have even touched it or used it. And it's very low. So we're sitting here
Yes.
talking about all of these things just breaking through barriers one after the other, while a large majority of the entire world's population has still not even clued into the fact that AI is a thing and that it will change everything.
Arthur Clarke has this quote, the science fiction writer from 2001 Space Odyssey, is that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I think to people who are not following this, one day magical robots are going to show up that just work.
Yeah.
Or magically the things that I thought about how the world works is going to just magically change. And magic in stories is not always the good guy, but it's going to be very frame shattering when it starts hitting people who haven't been paying attention.
We're on the cusp, probably 6 months out from like companies hiring AI right next to a human. Maybe less. Actually, it's happening now, if we're being honest, but I still think it's before it's like really widely adopted, 6 to 12 months. But it will be this year. Like I've seen enough tech to know it's this year and it will happen. But
You're talking about agentic AI, right?
not
Yeah,
even. I think we're getting very close to whether we call it agentic, we call it models, whatever. There's a whole bunch of different ways we could describe how those things actually are built or designed. It could be infrastructure, it could be a model built off of like prompt flow. But the point is, like, there will be a technology that can replicate a worker that, like, one of the big government bid contracts out there right now is AI and humans working together. And it's in like double digit millions. So if the government's already there, first of all, you know where reality actually is. Let's be honest. But we have to think about in 6 months, how many of the people that are currently sitting on a job are aware that the next time they come into work, the coworker that they talk to or interact with could be AI.
Yep.
And is that a reality that people are actually prepared for or even close
Nope.
to realizing is even that close? And I think, Randy, you're on to a really good point here is like, there's a group of people that are going to wake up one morning and see a robot walking down the street and they're going to TikTok their moment going, what is this? What is this? Oh my God. What in the world? And it's, dude, they've been here. It's been around for a while, but it's the first time for them. And because they haven't lived it or been keeping up with news, it is black magic because we're going from normally, what is the progression of the telephone? Let's use, what's another fast technology that we could use as an example that like really rapidly changed a market? Steam engine? Jesus.
Steam engine,
Like
printing press,
nothing is going
automobile.
to nothing is going to impact society like what we're about ready to see and experience. Like
I
nothing.
think printing press is the nearest analogy, right? The way that information was distributed and how people looked to authority and then all of a sudden had access to mass-produced knowledge, right? And now we have access to mass-produced intelligence. Yeah, that caused a little bit of havoc.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like it literally caused revolutions and war, and anybody with a printing press could now say, "I don't like this person's ideas. Let's go kill them." Hope James is like, "Wait a second."
I sent you this earlier today, John, but Salesforce CEO has announced that they're not hiring any more software engineers in 2025. So again, we've mentioned this before, but rewind even 2 years ago, a kid graduating high school that wanted to ensure that he was going to have a well-paying job, go into software engineering, go get a job with a tech company. You'll be making 6 figures right out of college, and you will be needed for life because the world runs on computers. But nobody anticipated the fact that the computers would start to write the code.
One thing, we're doing a lot of AI code writing here, and one thing that we're learning and have our assumptions validated is you still need software developers for now. You don't need bad software developers. You don't need as many software developers. But
don't need junior.
One senior software developer armed with AI can do the work of hundreds, maybe even thousands of developers a few years ago. You still need that one person.
That senior software engineer is just training the AI on how to write like a
keeping the AI from doing dumb things. So yeah, I guess it's training, but it's also AI is, again, it's general purpose fit to a specific company or code base instance. It's going to try to do things that don't make sense in the context where it's written, and nothing has gotten to the point where it's so good that it could just figure it out yet.
AI has a lot of knowledge. It is really bad at wisdom, like really noticeably bad, where you bring someone in who has wisdom and they don't even have to be hands on keyboard. They can literally just see the AI about to do what it's going to do or change a package and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing?
Right.
And it's, oh, you're right. I shouldn't do that. And
I-
then all of a sudden you have a very good like PR that actually goes through and
Yeah, I
no
actually don't
issue.
think AI really has that much knowledge. I think it has a lot of statistics. And I think the link between the knowledge that you're talking about is how you're interacting with it. It's really important how you interact and instruct, and that's what creates the knowledge. Because we could take the same model and give it a really stupid prompt, and then we could take the same model and give it a really good prompt. And the results are going to be really different, and that could be a different perception of the knowledge there.
Well,
I think they've been trained on massive corpuses of data that have knowledge in them. How do you access it?
so
That's the knowledge piece.
yeah, I think that's a really good point, James. I think to tie on to that too, the thing that is really transparent to me and interacting with some of the more, I'll call them advanced tools, like they are from a software perspective, they're well designed, they have a lot of architecture and they're doing a lot of things, but they're doing it with lesser models for cost reasons. And it is very transparent when a POC that they demoed is using a more advanced, higher level model, and the one that they give to the consumer is an absolute piece of shit, cheap model.
Well,
because
so-
I just did, like, when James, you say I'm prompting a model like 20 hours a day or something ridiculous. I can't remember what you called it, but
like that. Yeah.
I know
Did-
when I
we should-
look at an output,
You
that
have
what level
We
of
should do
model.
a blind
have-
model tasting.
Oh, I
Just
love it.
sit down in front of like
Oh,
models.
that
and,
is a
like,
game.
but I think so. The reason I brought this up, because I think this is a really interesting conversation where this is headed. We're talking about how many jobs are going to be eliminated, but John, we've developed skill sets that are going to be needed, and there's
Oh,
going to be
God.
a whole
Yeah.
bunch of jobs that are going to be created that will require these types of skill sets to operate the AI.
It's a thing.
And yeah,
I shake my head at this. I shake my head at this thought and concept every time because, and I want to hear your thoughts or your pushback on this. So that's what makes a good podcast, is a little bit of push and pull.
All right,
No,
somebody
it
get something ready to throw at him.
Yeah, exactly.
Wrong.
Okay, when AI is designed, right, to, in a sense, replace the need for human input. And yes, like you guys are prime examples of people that are just deep in the weeds of AI, and you could talk and walk and prompt circles around nearly 99% of people on this planet. But as it's progressing at this rapid rate, how long are these types of people, needed in the AI space before AI can just do those things, like you said earlier, where software may not be a requirement? You may be able to prompt exactly what you need out of an AI, and will
we
it
live
create
in
more jobs than it displaces? That's my real question.
Lies.
I don't.
So we live in an incredibly nuanced world, and so all of these models are tuned differently, right? They're trained differently. There's different data, there's different purposes, there's different applications. There's an entire building and training of the model side of this, and then there's an entire using and applying and creating value out of those models that have been trained. And there's not one model
They're not the
that
same people.
does it all, right?
They're not the same people. I can tell you right now, the people building these models are not the people that are making them dance. There's a very big difference in people that are taking these models and making them do the cha versus jiggle around like your mom dances. Like, very distinguishable difference.
That's a
Don't
visual.
talk about my mom like that.
Hey, don't
Today's
talk about my
podcast is
mom.
rated PG-13 for.
Yeah, you don't know how my mom dances.
I don't, thank God. But Jesus, we went there. So I think there's a very key aspect in something that I've noticed recently, and James, I think you've noticed with an uncensored model, like uncensored models, like the people making models, the data scientists that are thinking about the way the model should mathematically be designed are not the same people using it for the things that it's being used for. And as part of innovation, right? And that's why we have the diversity of models that are starting to come out now and doing different things. But this is a very interesting topic because I've seen this in practical, like enterprise applications of AI, where the things being designed by the people designing them don't understand the problem they're solving. But when we're talking about LLMs, this is an interesting dialogue because we're living it in the investor space. Like, we've been through these conversations. Like, oh, what do you guys do? We build AI. What do you build AI? We build AI that thinks. But what problem are you solving? Thinking AI that is able to think. What does that solve? I don't know. What do you think it could solve? Do you think about solving problems, or you only solve one problem? If the trash needs taken out and the dishes needs washed, are you incapable of doing both? Or you're only the trash taker outer? Like, I don't like it's a very, the whole world of investment is very focused, which is hilarious because if you go on LinkedIn right now and look at, oh my God, SaaS is dead. AI is going to replace SaaS, blah, 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 which is hilarious because if we think about what SaaS is and what SaaS applications and the platforms that are these big SaaS applications, and now we're talking about AI solving more than one problem. Wait a second.
Sam, to answer your question, I think when AI gets to that point, it'll build its own companies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
So then
like-
what do we do is the question, right? Like,
That's
or what does somebody do whose job is digitally based and easily replaced by an entire team of agents? And just
do
like
you
you
like
said, James,
VR?
the AI is enabling you to do the work of 10 people, where just a few years ago, if you were to be this guy that you are now in the AI space, you would have required a team of
yeah,
support.
this is a really philosophical type of question, right? Because it's,
But you have a team
yeah, I don't know.
of
I don't know.
AI.
Yeah.
Like that. No, but that, I think this is the
there could-
segue. The segue will be there's 20 people doing jobs. And now there's 5 people doing the same amount of work of 20. And then one day there will be one. And that one will orchestrate, command, fix, point, think, strategize across 20. And then that methodology, that learning, that business evolution will start to cascade until at such time where there is the ability to scale leadership AI across autonomous agents at scale across an entire organization. But the reality is the work of 20 people was based off of the concept of 8 hours a day. And that's not how AI operates.
Yeah, so it's the perception of value, right? And so as this evolution happens, our perception of what we value is going to change. So I'm just going to throw out a crazy idea. It is super crazy. It could be that we perceive competitive online video games and esports as more valuable now in the future than
Been a career.
white collar jobs today,
And-
right? And so the future way to earn money might be through competitive sport teams, like esports, where the human is still the central element to the activity, right? So that's a crazy idea. Who knows? But
My God,
like, it's everything is about perception. Perception is reality, right? And how does that perception change over time? I think that's the fun. Ooh, let's get our.
Well, it's going
let's
to
get
have
our
to change.
crystal ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
There's not
It
going
will.
to be a, oh, I think, oh, it maybe not. No, it's going to, like, there's a hard reality in 12 months that is going to slap some people in the face. And when it does, they're going to be sitting there staring, going, oh, well, wait, okay, I'll put my resume out there. And it's nope. This hit me really hard during Christmas. We had a longtime friend over, Siso, whose son, his entire job role completely eliminated from the company. Big company, and that was their main job. Like, the whole company's business was this thing. That's what
By
they did.
AI, eliminated
Yeah,
by AI.
and every single employee gone, all of it replaced by AI. And when I was like, oh wow, that's rough. What is he doing? He doesn't really know because like, everybody's doing it, and he doesn't want to just walk into that job again so it can happen again because it. And he would ask me, like, do you think that's I was like, what was it? And it was medical transcription. And I'm like, yeah, it's all gone. That's all gone.
Yeah.
That'll be that's I can guarantee you that's 100% replacement.
Yeah.
Like, very soon, like the immediate soon. That's not going to be a thing anymore. So that that type of conversation though is becoming more and more frequent, where this is the story, this is what kind of happened. But what's really funny, when's the last time you saw that in the news?
Yeah, they're not going to cover that, right?
It's way more entertaining to cover a war in Ukraine than it is like the fact that we're replacing hundreds of thousands of jobs with AI.
The reporters don't want their own bosses to notice that they could do that with them too.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds
they don't want
like
to
a
report on the news that'll get them fired
fun thing to
or
do, Randy.
replaced.
Yeah. I think my opinion is we do have the opportunity, if we take it as a society, to get back to more human oriented jobs and stuff. Like currently my wife being pregnant, navigating a lot of the healthcare system, and it is so inefficient and it's so dumb, and there's not enough people with enough skills to answer questions. And to big keyword for us has been continuity of care, because you see this specialist and this specialist, you go to this hospital, this place, and the regulatory reasons why data sharing doesn't happen, which also have to be solved, because thanks to the regulations, no matter how good the technology will get, some of this stuff will lag. But like just being able to have more nurses, to be able to have people who can answer from deeper knowledge bases and be better connected to research. What if the patient caregiver ratio was like 2-to-1, or like it was really deep? And in education
and you
too.
could pay them more.
Yeah,
And you
everybody
could pay
can
them
make more money. Exactly.
Yep.
You also have to remove a lot of weight. There's a lot of people in administrative roles right now in healthcare, just to pick on them. Lovely people stuck in very inefficient systems that can be completely automated in the right circumstances, and probably will. There's concern for those type of roles, but I think there's just a big opportunity to think through what it still means to be human. And maybe an AI and a robot could technically give me care. Maybe some people will prefer that, but it might just be nicer to have that human touch. And see,
But this is a really good topic specifically within healthcare, because if you think about that for a second, one of the limitations is the amount of people and what they can do. Do you really need a nurse to come in, take your blood pressure, and ask you 5 questions?
no.
So what happens if you say, okay, here's NurseBot, and NurseBot, its sole purpose is to ask the 5 questions, take your blood pressure, and get your pulse? Like if we aggregate that across an entire hospital, what is the amount of hours saved just on nursing staff?
The difference is that what the nursing staff does, right? So if I had a nurse who's only looking after me and maybe one other person, right? And yes, the AI is going to give all of the analytics, is going to have all the knowledge base, but that wisdom, that care, that you're going to be okay, that this is something that we know how to handle, and that is the piece that I think can stay human and could scale significantly.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that happens after that. Like I'm thinking of these small moments in time that like check in, like filling out a form for the 500th time, even though you went to the same in-care hospital, but it's across the street.
It is actually, so it's funny too. That's also a intentional thing that they design systems to get so it's weird.
It's 2025.
It's definitely annoying.
I'm just saying, like we have had encryption for a few years.
No, it's not privacy. It's like literally they want to make sure that you have a consistent story, because you may not know your symptoms, or you may have a part of your medical problem might be memory or might be abuse in some cases. So sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes it's because they're inefficient as hell.
I'm going to go with 90% inefficient. I will agree with you. There is 10% that makes sense. But most of the time, no. I've literally been like, I just did this down your hallway. Our computer systems aren't connected. Why aren't they connected? You're the X-ray for the hospital I'm at. It's just the way that the systems are designed. That just makes me want to pull my hair out and scream.
We've already seen real-world examples of AI outperforming average doctors in terms of diagnosis and treatment plans.
You don't get to say average doctors when it outperforms all doctors.
All doctors. Yeah, you're right.
I'm just saying.
100%.
I think of the one study. I think there was a study out that though had some flaws in the methodology. So,
I just looked that up. Yeah. Actually, 2024, there was about 10 studies, it looks like, where accuracy ranging for Bard, Claude, and GPT-4 were between 27.9 and 31.7 for precise diagnosis. But what is interesting about that same study, the accuracy level for broader body diagnosis was within 65 to 71%, which is still higher average than your family doctor.
Let's imagine a crazy world where AI is doing medical. Who's held accountable when something goes wrong?
You are
the patient.
Why don't I get the decision to opt in to use a medical AI? Oh man, I about cursed again. I'm going to get in trouble. But no, like here's a camera, here's a mic. You teledoc me anyway, and you're going to tell me that my nice little AI, my O1, cannot figure out that I have a cold.
Well, maybe if it's on a supercomputer on my
no, I'm-
desktop and I don't have to share my
yeah.
records.
But you're not like that's I don't know. We're at that point where if our concern is networking and data and communication, then I'm sorry, but I can point at 20 vulnerable systems in a hospital on any given day that are probably far worse than you sending AI an API call.
You also have the element of human error mixed in there. We know that malpractice is massive.
It never happens.
That happens.
It's not
Yeah,
doctors
that
are perfect.
never happens. And biology is quickly becoming an information technology. Our genome is mostly mapped out. AI is, just like you said, Randy, the protein with AlphaFold, predicted protein folds, and it's just transforming that entirely. So if I'm summarizing this correctly, John, what you're saying is that you would opt in, and I think we're all probably nearing the
I
40
would
mark,
I would accept the risk.
Yeah.
for like a robotic proctologist. Maybe you don't have to go, right? I mean, you don't have to have that awkward
Does it have
That is a
warming
level
digits?
of conviction.
Self-warming digits.
self-warming fingers.
That is the degree of conviction. You heard it here
Burn your
first,
head
folks.
and cough.
Not only will John get the first digit that gets shipped, he'll also be the first in line for the digital the robotic
Woohoo!
proctologist.
First AI administered suppository.
Well, imagine
Oh,
the
man.
finger has all kinds of sensors on it. It can collect all kinds of data that a human finger
has
couldn't.
The only thing I could think about is, have you ever seen that video of the people who like 2 years ago were trying to get ChatGPT to control robotic arms chopping food? It's like flying.
Oh,
Yeah, maybe there are a few areas we might want to
one
wait.
step at a
But
time, right?
yeah, let's take it slow.
Let's get to know these robots first, and let's see
Take
what
me
they're
on
all
a
about.
date.
Yeah, warm it up a little bit.
But-
Either way,
But think about this, like back to James's like future, if we're leaning in and we're thinking about what this is really heading towards, imagine your digital twin that has your DNA mapping, your entire
Yeah.
biology, your medical history, and it can predict based off of blood levels, like dehydration levels, like all of these things that we have to go to a doctor that require sensors and all this different stuff that are democratized within a few sensors that you can just like boop, boop, boop. I think of what was the movie, not Dumb and Dumber, it's about on the same wavelength, where the wrestlers take over the White House and
idiocracy.
Idiocracy.
Oh,
This goes in your mouth, this goes in your pit, this one goes in your butt.
Oops,
Wait a
wrong
second.
way.
Wait a second. Wait. Yeah. No, this one goes in your mouth. This one goes. But that type of self-home care kit where you could have a daily evaluation, imagine how much cancer gets stopped before it ever becomes a problem.
Yeah. One of the first things that like clued me into AI, I stumbled on this random video, and it was this PBS documentary. This is a couple of years ago on AI, and it was showing these examples of an AI model that was analyzing scans for breast cancer, mammograms, and the doctor, which was like a world-renowned doctor in that field, looked at these same charts that an AI model had been trained to recognize early signs of an issue or something that's not right. And he said, me as a human, I would have looked at these scans and I would have sent that patient home. I would have said, everything looks great. And then the AI system said, no, within 4 years, this patient will develop breast cancer. And sure enough, spot on. And it was detecting these anomalies at a 90% success rate, way, way earlier than a doctor ever could. So
you know why?
It's data, right?
It is, but there's a nuance. So we as people are only so good at pattern recognition. Like really highly intelligent people get better and better. If you look at like your normal IQ test, there's an extreme high amount of pattern recognition in that, because the ability to look at something and very quickly notice what is off or what is the thing is a part of neuroplasticity that is an indicator of high intelligence. AI is really good at pattern recognition, like really good, but it's really good when you get to use Python and you get to tell it to use. I'm sorry, Randy, but seriously, like, so I did this live at a party like a year ago, and there was a child pediatric, and we'll have to have the other person come on and tell the story because it was actually really cool. But they were like, oh, John can do like really crazy stuff with AI. And they're like, oh, what can you do? And I'm like, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm a child pediatric like bone person. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like and oh man, what do you do? Detect cancer? She's like, yeah, like we try to detect cancer, but we're in a really rural area. So I usually have to send them somewhere else to get scans. Like we can do basic x-rays, but we can't do the really good stuff. And I think it was, I can't remember. They're like, can you use your agent to do this? And I'm like, oh, if I take the Python libraries for image analysis and I start, okay, yeah, give me a couple minutes. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, do you have some images I could use? Like I need good and bad. I need both. And they're like, sure. So they gave me some good and bad. And I went through a couple iterations. And within 15, 20 minutes, I had an LLM using, I think, about 10 different Python imaging techniques to decompose, to reverse, to count pixels, to break the image down so that it could start to like take it apart. And this was early on when your ability to do visual models was like still a thing. So I actually wasn't doing visual models. I was solely using Python and an LLM to talk to
This was
Python.
a language model you did?
Yeah, this was just an LLM connected and using Python. And it was able to predict, in all of her examples, even new ones after the training, were able to predict what like the cancer. And it to once the model locked on to that pattern, was able to identify it, it was like every time. Even where she was like, this is extremely early stage. I doubt it's going to recognize it. And I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. And it goes, it's 100% they have cancer. And she's like, how? That imagery right now is programs. They're programs, and the AI that's doing that has been very rule-based. LLMs are not rule-based. Like that is the one thing that is extremely cool about something that is iteratively using code to analyze an image. It can do it multiple times, and it can do it when it has doubt or it thinks that something may be off, and dive even deeper or cut the pixels to another like. So James could probably talk about this far better than I can because he's the Python whiz, but it's fascinating to think about. We've moved past the AI software that currently sits in X-ray labs, where very soon, and it'll probably have to pass FDA, and it'll be a decade before everybody sees the benefit. But the reality is, like, very soon we're going to have healthcare oriented X-ray LLMs that are going to be able to use these other tools and process things better than any X-ray tech ever could.
Yeah, the AI does have rules, and those rules are statistically driven, and there's rules on the model side, and then there's, like we were talking about earlier, there's rules on the input side. Figuring those out, that's the key, because it is very predictable. But I think the significant thing here and the impacts of the healthcare is really around behavior. So like a lot of people, especially in the American healthcare system, everything's reactive.
Yeah.
I go to the doctor when there's a problem.
Yeah.
I think where the AI can be applied to help people out is I can figure out that I need to go to the doctor before it becomes a problem. But then there's a whole then there's a whole human element to this that we can't forget about too. I don't need AI to tell me if I'm smoking like 5 packs of cigarettes a day, I might be at risk for lung cancer, and I don't need a doctor to tell me you should probably stop smoking cigarettes. So it's interesting. I'll just leave it at that.
It's also like the human psychology. They say like a lot of people Google and their search bar knows them better than most people in their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
The degree to which we're willing to confide in a robot versus even a trusted loved one or a doctor maybe changes some of the dynamic about how people are going to get some of that information that could be analyzed.
I'm telling you, that is going to be a breakout thing this year. If not this year, like maybe early 2026, but the entire AI psychology or self-help psychology side is going to 100% be a thing that shows up.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like I said, the biology is becoming an information technology. We know enough about our bodies, our cells, how they work, how they age, how that progresses over time, that we can put that against these language models and these massive databases and figure out what the issues are with.
We can pattern match, right? We don't even have to know everything. We just know that there's enough other people in the sample that I find the one most like myself, and that's probably predictive of what will happen with me.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think back to the rules thing, John, I think you've actually made a really important observation because we think of rules in such a
Binary.
binary way that what you're describing, it's still rules,
Yeah.
but it's so more fluid, it's so more flexible, right? It's so more
It's a level
organic.
of it simulates a level of reasoning.
Yeah, you are doing that, and those are becoming the rules, right?
Yeah,
So,
true.
but that's
But that's
I
an
think
important
I think that's
nuance.
yeah, I think that's a really important nuance because I think we tend to think about things as like this rule, like binary rules.
Well,
Mhm.
you're bringing up a really valid point because now that I'm like thinking through it, I was using encode
Mhm.
because obviously I wasn't allowed to do medical stuff with a
Yeah,
regular
it
4.0 model, so I was using encode.
yeah,
And encode, it's a it's a mixture of prompt,
mhm,
reasoning, and code, and those all work together.
right,
So that's an interesting call out because I think you're spot on because if we go back to like how we explain, hey, if X, there's not just a chain of thought, there's a tree of thought. And I need
mhm,
you to evaluate the 5 or 10 different scenarios that possibly could be. And then I need you to follow that chain of thought down that branch. And then if you run into a point where you reasonably, or you have enough certainty to say this is no longer a relevant thing, I need you to follow back up and pick a new branch. And
Mhm.
that, I think that's an important nuance, especially if we think about like how the functionality of O1 or O1 mini works. And it's very sequentially in like where we go, which is, I
mhm.
think, a very clear kind of nuance in the pattern of thought you get out of it.
Yeah, and compare that to how many family doctors are going to be doing that same level of
The time.
research on every patient. They don't have time.
Yeah.
It's
Of you sat in front of a family doctor, I feel like he has a virus.
the
First of
doctor has
all,
a virus.
like this is my military analyst side where I'm just like, you have feelings about my virus. No, we use data, but that is that knowledge, wisdom, that experience side of. I've been a doctor for 40 years. I may have a little bit of Alzheimer's, but I'm not telling anybody. But like, you don't really know, especially in that's why they call it medical practice, right? There is no certainty with biology and like how one virus affects one person versus another.
The insurance actuary tables
They do
disagree.
put a number on it. Yeah.
This is this is actually circling back to the
Oh
comment I
man.
was making earlier of who's liable, because I think there's like the whole insurance side of the equation too I think has a big influence in the field of medicine.
Yeah.
And so introducing AI into here, what's going to happen with that?
Yeah,
So it's
I bet you it reduces insurance costs.
I think so.
Yeah.
it should.
A
There
lot
will
of
be
insurance
more.
will incentivize preventative care, right? They'd rather pay for that than for the
Mhm.
long term thing. Funny story though, I forget if I told you guys this on a podcast or not. I don't think so, but I worked for an insurance company once, a life insurance company, as a consultant, and they were talking about their AI models. It's obvious as we talk about all these billions of parameters and all the things that like the model can do. There's a very simple underwriting formula of this model that they built to determine whether or not somebody was worth underwriting and giving life insurance to. And at the end of the day, after all the model training and 6 months, a year of like salaries and stuff, it was basically, is this person over or under 25? And if it
Yeah.
was under 25, yeah, we'll insure them. To a certain degree, too, there's a lot of
But
this over engineering that.
I have to hand it to James. I have seen him do this live in meetings where he has some buddies talking about the model that they're building and all the parameters and all this different
Right.
stuff, and they're just like they have deep dive for 30 minutes of technical jargon, and he's, oh, so what you're saying is you like spent the last 2 months building the same thing that this analysis told us.
Yep.
And the person's like, no, I'm not saying that. This, and James is like, no, literally, you got 50%, we got 49, but we took 3 days. And it's like I have to hand it to him. He has cut through some data bullshit live that has just astounded me. But like what's fascinating about what you just brought up, Randy, is we are not far from some of those type of events. Like there is going to be all this investment in, okay, we're using LLMs for really exploratory like applications. And I think we're going to find out in I would say the next coming months, especially, that we have these really fancy, monstrous models that are being directly outperformed by something that sits on a local compute.
That's interesting.
Yep.
So tying this all together, there's
Good
so
luck.
much to talk about. Yeah, good luck. We've covered literally everything.
We should do
I
this
think we
again
could probably sit
sometime.
here. Yeah, maybe next week.
All right, so God, no.
There's at least 500 billion parameters.
To re-engineer
If
God.
we don't make a model and call it God, I'm going to be disappointed.
25 to me feels like not the year that everything happens that we're talking about, but it's the year that is like the catalyst to all those things. It feels like we've reached this tipping point. There's talk of AGI. Sam Altman put out his blog on Sunday saying that we are now confident we know how to build AGI as we've traditionally understood it, talking about AI agents joining the workforce. I want to pivot just a little bit in wrapping this up. What are we doing as a company? So if we're talking about SaaS dying and robots and agents joining the workforce, what is Enable doing right now to build and stay relevant and be a part of this transformation, evolution, whatever you call it? I want to hear responses.
That's the big question.
That's the big question. And it's been a really exciting week. We've seen a lot of cool updates being pushed. We've had a lot of cool topics discussed internally. I want to give people a little bit of insight into what it is we're building and why and how and all of that.
We don't intend to make this a sales pitch, but we're definitely thinking about these big picture questions, right? And we're engaging with our community about how this is going to impact society, how it's going to impact our jobs, how it's going to impact our families. And more than any one thing that we're doing, I think that the engagement and awareness of what AI is and can be is an important part of what we're focusing on. Now, we're also building some cool stuff, or should I say some cool shit, sorry, to the censors. And some of that is available publicly, and some of that is still in the R&D lab. We are every day waking up and thinking about the whole picture of AI, right? Coming from backgrounds in security and then risk management, financial services, and the military. Like, we're not just building cool things to take your data and take your money like certain other large companies that you might have recently mentioned. We're looking at the impact and the enablement of a society that works with AI.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
and-
I think, go ahead, James. I want to hear your
Well,
thoughts too before I taint them
Yeah,
with my
so
own.
well, and we're doing our best to build it in a way because we talked a lot today about how the inputs matter, and so we're building things in a way that is going to be easy to use, right? That's going to be intuitive for users. That's going to to simplify the process of how to get quality results, how to get more productivity, how to get to your target, what you're trying to do faster. And so I think that's a really important thing that we're always trying to learn how to do. Like, we have figured out how to do this. What the interesting part is, and we're starting to get feedback and we're iterating, is okay, how do we now take this process? How do we bottle that lightning and build this in a way that is very intuitive for anyone to use? And then how do we educate, right? How do we keep people up to speed and bring people along on the journey? Because this is where the future is going. And so we want to take people with us. We want to take people into the future. So that's my perspective there.
John, anything to add to that?
Can you blank out everything I'm about to say and just make it like my voice, like my mouth is moving, but there's no sound, like technical difficulty or like something?
Let's hear it. Drop it on us. I'll just
Just
impose
say
if
some
I want
I
random
it.
just think
things
I think it would be
yeah.
really funny to like just as it's transitioning, just be like, fuck.
Well, see, we're training the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like, yeah, only give them every other word.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, yes, we should. I don't want to release some of this mainly because it's still very early, but also because there's a lot of other things that are topics that we need to figure out. So I think we want AI to be more personal. We want it to be more about what you need and what you need to do with it. But we want it, as James said, to be intuitive about the way that it needs to apply, whether it's knowledge, whether it's language, or other tools that it may have access to you. So in order to do that, there are various techniques and things that have led me to be able to track people throughout. No, find people. No, yeah. But no, like there. I think we're on the cusp of something very unique and a very unique value prop that, if applied appropriately, could give a nuance to interactions with AI, not just once and not just in interaction like chat windows, but like the entire time you use it.
Yeah, that
Sharing,
part's
we're
exciting.
sharing the
And
magic, guys. That's what we're doing.
yeah, not in great detail here, but soon. Follow us, pay attention. You'll see the magic. But
If you go to
I
parties
view
with
this as
John, you can see the magic.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. If we ran
Comments
this,
speak-
Bleep that out. Bleep that out. Or freeze my frame.
We're just gonna cut that one out of there.
I mean, at the highest
We don't want to
level,
declare
without,
war with them. That's a bad idea.
without spilling, and we're not trying to. That's our.
Yeah.
We've made that very clear. We're not trying to build better than or
We're on a different
compete.
mission than they are.
That
completely.
sounds like a terrible motto. We are trying to build better than everyone.
Yeah. Hey, but maybe inadvertently we wind up doing.
We're just trying to
exactly
get
that.
our AI to dance better than your mom.
Yeah, for real. We just wanted to cha.
Touche.
That's right.
Go.
Yeah, I view us as a bridge.
One day
We're,
we get a tango.
we identified the fact we know that there are some major sweeping changes that will come as a result of AI's progression and technological innovation and progression in general. And we also know that very few people even slightly grasp the concept of what's about to become, let alone how to use the technology or be involved with the technology, upskilling their own skill sets and educations into a place that's usable by AI. So I view this as like a bridge where we're creating a space where people can come to intuitively learn AI, receive support, education, resources around that, all while interacting with an interface that's probably the most intuitive on the planet, or will be very soon. And then
Oh my, there it is
We're
again.
not.
Oh,
make
So Sam, you're gonna like start talking again and bring us home, right? And then we're gonna cut that
Yeah.
back to like
That's
I was
right.
like,
15
wrap
minutes
it
ago.
catch us on episode 5, the end, right after John drops the.
Stop saying it.
No, we'll cut it. We'll cut it.
We'll
Don't
cut
worry. Don't worry.
these are easy things. We just stitch it together. No one will
So
notice.
easy. And time is an endless commodity that we all have so much of. So just the more edits, the better.
This has been a really fun podcast, I have to say. Like, we hit a lot of
Yeah, I think-
topics, but
I
like,
think this helped.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
one. I think this is a really good week, first of all, and I think that helps when
That's true.
there's a lot of positivity, energy, right, towards the end. But the other side too is we actually got to talk about a lot of the things we've been talking about. These are not new topics, right? These are topics that we've been discussing for, holy crap, James, like 3 years at least
yep.
at this point.
Long time.
So we've had these bourbon nights or VR nights or game nights where we're like, dude, it would be badass if the LLM could like do this and you could do. And like the next day, James is like, dude, I woke up at 3 a.m., couldn't sleep. You know what I did? I built a brain. And
Well,
you're like,
it's all-
bullshit. Bullshit.
It's all
That's some
coming.
fun
Dude,
As somebody
coming
who's
soon.
as somebody who's explored more of the philosophical side and less of the technical side of AI until coming over here to Enable, it's been really fun. There's some absolutely incredible things coming to the platform, and just the way it's all being integrated and the way it's being designed, it's cool, and I'm excited. I've mentioned it before, but there's a massive hole. There's a massive hole in understanding and education, and we want to help people close that gap. That's it. And we've got some cool, exciting ways to do that. Stay tuned is really the message here, because we're just getting started. Our app is in its very earliest stages of alpha testing. We'll open the doors to more and more people as we roll out. So keep an eye out on our public socials, because we'll be dropping some more information.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you, Sam.
That's it. Bleep everything from this entire episode.
Send prompts, not nudes. I just want to AI some shit.